My name is Frank Joshi, and I'm here today. Oh, by the way, thank you very much for the invitation and for putting me on camera. I'm here today as Frank Joshi, the director of Mvine, a small UK business specialising in federated identity. But I'm also here wearing other hats. So I'm here today as a representative of the OIX, an organisation that specialises in solving some of the identity challenges, MEF, looking at building ecosystems within the mobile world, TM Forum, Tech UK, amongst a range of others. Now, some might ask, why are you involved in so many of those organisations? Well, there's a common thread that runs between them all, and that's how do we solve the identity problem? And one of the challenges that we have, not just in an event like this today, but more broadly speaking, is there are silos of people trying to solve the identity problem from the perspective of individuals, but there's another bigger tsunami coming at us, which is the Internet of Things, or as I'm now going around the market saying, the identity of things. If we think we've got a problem solving citizen identity, we've got an even bigger one trying to solve the identity of things. And until we grapple with those and work out how we can bind the two together, we're in for an almighty mess in the marketplace. But then for some, mess is good. Mess is commercially viable. But actually, no, in all seriousness, if we don't solve the identity problem, then we actually, I believe, really actually hold back civilization as we know it. There are lots of technologies now emerging which will effectively keep a database of things relating to your phone, where it is, how often it's on, how you hold it, all types of things relating to the device itself and how you use it. Then, of course, there's the mobile operator that sits behind, and they can provide all sorts of services such as Mobile Connect and attribute services. And this is where, for example, if somebody's using their mobile phone to access a website or a relying party, then they can tell the relying party, for example, whether the phone has been recently stolen, whether there's been a SIM swap or call forwarding associated with it, because those are typically attributes that are associated with fraudulent activity. Not always, but sometimes. Again, if we're looking at mobile operators playing a part of that identity proofing and authentication, there are other attributes that it can provide as well. Many operators are starting to develop their own KYC products because, of course, in many instances, they know who you are because they onboarded you to sell you the phone in the first instance. Works great if there's a one-to-one relationship between the individual and the operator. Not so good if you're using a corporate phone because, of course, the operator will not know who you are apart from the organisation that you belong to. Then, of course, there's using the phone itself for accessing new services to ID proof. And of course, we're all familiar with using our thumb to open up our Apple device and our Samsung device. But there are some great, exciting technologies, such as those coming from the likes of iProve, which are looking at facial biometrics. And even in that space, there are hundreds of companies providing solutions, but there's only one or two that actually have the credibility and also the credentials and the approval to actually provide fantastic authentication services, such as facial. We're starting with a clean slate. Then, of course, the kind of technologies, the trust frameworks, the regulation is kind of easy. But actually, it's difficult because we have a lot of legacy regulation, systems, processes, mindset. So to some extent, even to answer that question, you almost need to look at it as per country. For example, in the UK, if you want to create an identity, typically an identity provider, especially one under the gov.uk verify scheme, will use a credit reference agency to verify and validate some of the data that you have about you, your address. They'll use a passport office to validate, guess what, your passport. Other countries, people don't have passports. They don't have credit reference agencies. So again, to answer the question, you need to look at the broader picture and the context in which it occurs. But to answer the more philosophical, what is an identity? Now, there are lots of papers written about it, and in its most extreme, people talk about having one database of all of your identity attributes, which is one of the reasons why historically people in this country didn't want to have an identity card, because there was an assumption that the government would have this huge database with everything about you. The reality is even the government doesn't actually have one single database. It's federated across a whole number of them. Then at the other extreme, you've got people who will put forward the whole idea of self-sovereign identities, the whole notion that you will effectively own that database of all of your attributes. Well, again, the reality is that you're going to run your own tech company? You're going to run your own database? You're going to be responsible for securing those attributes? No, not at all. So somewhere in between, there's got to be the solution. But also you've got to look at the context of what it is that relates to asserting your identity. It could be verifying your age, in which case all the relying party needs to know is that you're over a certain age. Everything about you is irrelevant. In other more extreme cases, they may need to know that you've got a driving license, you've got a passport, you've got a degree. Now, in those instances, you could hold those claims in a database, but actually the way I see the world moving is that actually those little mini micro sources of data will exist. There will be trust agreements between people who will aggregate aspects of your identity, and then there's the context of which those attributes are asserted. Simple example, you knock on a door somewhere and you want to assert your identity. Well, they'll effectively ask you for a shopping list. The shopping list will be provided back to your technical provider, who will say, well, actually, we need to verify your driving license. So guess what? We'll go and ping the driving license department to say whether your driving license is valid. Job done. Then maybe the same to your university or some collective organisation, and so on and so on and so forth. So even from my perspective, this whole idea of a self-sovereign identity, I don't believe is going to be a big bucket of everything about you, because even those attributes are transitory. They belong and are asserted by other organisations. And so this notion of it all being in one place, again, I don't believe. It's going to be in different systems. There'll be a regulatory framework around it, trust agreements between different organisations, so that you, with your consent, will be able to assert a series of credentials and attributes about yourself for the appropriate context. If we think we've got a puzzle and a challenge with citizen identity, we've got a tsunami of a nightmare coming at us with the Internet of Things, or the identity of things, because of course aspects about who we are and what we are will now be held or monitored or gathered by the different devices that are going to surround us. And of course they're all going to be part of the new network, or in the future as 5G takes off, the ability for 5G to aggregate, potentially in a car, 600 fields of information in real time. It's a big challenge. And I don't believe the industry as a whole has fully understood it to be a problem, and I don't believe we're doing enough to actually solve the problem. My biggest concern is that the regulators really haven't got a clue what's going on out there. The bad actors are already breaking into our devices. We've already heard of some breaches where a bad actor managed to get into the network running the security cameras for an organisation, and through that back door managed to break into their network. Just recently I bought 3 new plugs. I'm now worried. I've got 4 plugs that are in my home when the whole ambition about them was to allow me to remotely switch on and off a device, but also for it to tell me how much power I'm actually using in real time. Now I'm thinking about it, the setup meant that I had to talk to it wirelessly. It then asked to connect to my Wi-Fi at home. So I gave it my username and password to gain access to my Wi-Fi. It's now on my network. I have no idea whether that's going to send out information about the performance of the device to a third party, or has now opened up a back door into my home network. Look, we're going through a revolution, not just technologically, but societally, philosophically, religiously, and all the above. Technology is a fantastic opportunity, or offers us a fantastic opportunity to make our lives better, faster, easier, more compliant, perhaps that's not the right word to use, but more efficient and more effective. We've got a lot of problems to solve before we get there. But that said, there's some fantastic things that are occurring which will help us live a little bit longer, in terms of gathering medical data about individuals so that doctors can identify specific problems that you may have and target a solution for it. But where it's going to end up? I think if we think we've had a revolution in terms of the internet over the last 20 years, I don't think we've even started.